I thought a very interesting place to start with is the we're going to hop around.
Sure.
I'm not going to go book by book.
Okay.
But I'm just going to talk across them. But in many levels, the first book is the most powerful in itself, that storyline. So there's a good thing to start with there. And this will be full of spoilers, so for anyone who hasn't read it.
Yeah.
Okay. And based on books, not movies, because the movies leave a lot of stuff out that is important. So he starts, just the way it starts is the first thing. This awareness, it really is a very powerful telling, I think, of the awareness journey. Okay? So first you got this guy, this young boy, who's an orphan. He's been told his parents died in a car crash. And strange things have been happening his whole life that he can't explain. His hair growing back despite his auntie and uncle cutting it. All that sort of stuff. And there's the scene in the movie where he talks to the snake and he's like, what the hell? And the glass is a bit... And all these funny things he can't explain. And he's so belittled, put in this cupboard under the stairs. And why is he put in the cupboard under the stairs? Because of his aunt and uncle's insecurity. Because his aunt was so jealous of his mum because his mum was a witch. And his mum didn't have any magical ability. And that shows how we deal with insecurity. You know what I mean? She's a perfect example of that. Petunia Dursley is her name. Just that, well, you're a freak. You know, my sister's a freak. And those people and blah, blah, blah. So he's humbled in this cupboard under the stairs. And he's famous, right? Because he got rid of Voldemort and no one knows how. So he grows up and his parents were rich, which he soon finds out when Hagrid takes him to his vault. Yeah. So he grows up to the age of 11, rich and famous, but not knowing it. Right? It's very powerful. And on some level, I relate growing up well off, but not knowing it till teenage years.
Yep.
And then you've got Hagrid comes, you know, and it's funny how they try to block him realizing who he is. But if you understand more deeply why the Dursleys are the way they are, it's built on insecurity. And it's built on a lack of self-love, for a lack of what his aunt didn't get from her parents, obviously, because they were, oh wow, Lily's a witch, you know.
How do you think it manifests in the young one?
In Dudley?
Yeah.
Well, he's just, you know, they all projected onto Dudley, isn't it? All that insecurity projected onto Dudley. And everyone knows the Dudley. Yeah. Right? Everyone knows the Dudley. It's I'm going to make my child, and he's so babied by his parents. Like, oh, little Duddykins. You know, and when he gets injured or sick or, you know, he's in trouble in the later films and like, 36 presents? Last year I had 37. Yeah. And they're like, no, you're not counting these two. We'll go buy more. And, you know, and it's totally their insecurity. And this is why trauma and insecurity is generational. It's just this story that keeps pinging. Well, that pushed that way. So their kid's going to get pushed that way. And then what's he going to be like? And, but it also helps Harry become who he becomes. And so many of the most beautiful people you'll meet in life have had very interesting families. And you think, how could they be so beautiful if the family's so dysfunctional? But it just depends on who you are deep down and how you respond to that environment. You can internalize it in very different ways. So the interesting part is and the famous, you're a wizard, Harry. And he died, rest in peace, Robbie Coltrane, who plays Hagrid in the films. But, you know, they're trying to hide him from the letters from Hogwarts, right? They don't want him to realize who he is. And they fly, they go away. Now they're on this random island, cut off from the world. Yeah. And that's so funny. To me, that's the lesson of you just can't hide from it, though. You just keep hiding. We talk about that with the ego, right? You can just keep hiding it. You can tell yourself you got it surgically removed. But you can't outpace it. You can't outpace magic. And then Hagrid comes and goes, didn't you ever wonder, you're a wizard, Harry. And how funny is it that Harry, who has all the evidence that he's a wizard, resists it? He's just got that learned inferiority from his upbringing. Like, no, I can't be a wizard. You're wrong. And it just reminds me about how we all resist, like, a better an understanding that we're not fucking empty, useless people, and that we resist our kind of magic in a way. It's just so relatable. You know, I've had that so much. So many people were like, oh, I won't do that because I don't feel like I'm good enough or I'm worthy to do it. That's totally not based in reality.
That's when you start looking for non-fiction figures.
Yeah, it really is. And you see all that play out. Now, how does Hagrid actually... And you have to forgive me because I don't want to miss stuff for this. I did write notes to prepare. You know, how does he actually get Harry over the line? I mean, you can just relate to it. If you were actually a wizard, right?
Yeah.
How would someone convince you you're a wizard? Because you could think, well, maybe there's a possibility, because it would make sense for all the other wizards to just have been hidden from the world. Yet you have this inherited logic that stops the proposition. Because a lot of people read Harry Potter as a child. You go on with that thing like, maybe I'm a wizard. That's why I am the way I am. And I'm just waiting for a letter from Hogwarts. And sometimes as a kid, you just go along with that story. But how would someone actually tell you that you're a wizard if you were? And what, I don't know if you notice or remember, but what Hagrid does is he goes into Harry's own experience. He goes, didn't you ever do things you couldn't explain how you did them? Do something strange that didn't make sense to anyone? And then Harry's like, oh. I'll put you on the spot. Does that last thought, does that remind you of anything within personal, like the difficulties in the world, especially with this stuff?
It makes you think. I don't know. I just think about all the things that I've done that I doubted in the past.
Yeah.
It just makes you realize you don't see it before you start it. If that makes sense. But it can be, I don't know, there's a balance even with that.
There is.
Because then there's like, then if you're too far on the end of that, it's like just pushing too much.
Yeah.
Do you know
to
what
prove
I mean?
you can do it.
You prove you can do it versus when do you realize that you can just probably do things if you want? Because it's especially growing up, that's why it resonates. You're just riddled, depending on your childhood, riddled with insecurities.
Yeah.
Like
most of us are. Yeah.
Just I don't know.
I think we all are.
I can speak from my own experience, which is, you know, just being shy and, you know, socially anxious at times and all these sorts of things, which then create those things inside you, which leads you to believe that I'm not that kind of person or I'm not. And that's why the story, because you see that in yourself, you're like, oh shit. Yeah. I was, you know, a bit of Harry Potter.
Yeah, we all are.
Yeah, everyone's like, there's that transcendence element to it.
What a word.
Yeah. Which is, you're reading, and because it's not instructing, you're seeing like, oh yeah, I did that, and I didn't realize I could do that. I did that, and I didn't realize I could do that. That's
what I love. That's the point I was thinking of.
Yeah.
People, there's this quote, I think Carl Jung, I think it was, who said, beware unearned wisdom. Right? When people don't actually have the experience, you can only ever build on the foundations of someone's experience themselves.
Yes.
I can't tell anyone something that they don't have that's what Hagrid builds the case from Harry's experience. He doesn't give him, no, this is how magic works. You know what I mean? And this is the science behind magic. And he doesn't say, we've got, you know, Albus Dumbledore, he can do magic. Your parents, they could do magic. I can do magic, but I'm not supposed to. You know, he doesn't try and intellectualize it. He goes, didn't you ever do something and you didn't know what you were? So, for example, I made an episode, what you talked about with DeMello and everything, which at this point might have been a previous episode in this series.
Yeah.
You keep coming back to it and you have new understanding of a line you've already read because now you have different experiences. You can only ever... It's like any actual insight is like a sperm. Forgive the crudeness of the analogy. It's like a sperm and experience is the egg.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the egg, it's just someone throwing sperm in your face.
It's like when you go...
Your experience is the egg that it actually fertilizes, and then you can have a realization. If you have nothing to actually build on to understand something, it's like explaining Harry Potter, these things about Harry Potter or awareness to someone who's like a child. Because they don't have any concepts for it yet, because they haven't experienced.
It's like in uni, for example.
Yeah.
When you're very... I don't know. I was insecure just naturally.
Me too.
I think, I don't know, most people would probably be able to relate.
Yeah.
But you think, okay, how am I going to get into professional job? Few problems. You don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And you're sort of trying to figure it out, which is why you tend to lean more towards, things that are instructional.
Yeah.
Rather than your own experience.
Yeah, answers. Yep.
Yeah. So, but then you sort of, as you move through things, you just realize that what you're experiencing is not what you thought was the case. And you can, I don't know if it's, you sort of, if you're talking personal development, your personal development is moving through the experiences.
Yeah.
Yourself.
Yeah.
Mainly.
It's not someone supplanting those experiences for you.
It just...
The problem is when people really want to get it, right? When people really want to get it,
yes,
that's when the parroting really starts. They're wanting to get ahead to the outcome of I want to feel better.
Yes.
So here's information that doesn't come from my experience, and then that's when it gets misapplied. And I think we actually see that throughout the Harry Potter books as well. I think that's really demonstrated. Probably, especially the part where Voldemort returns. Again, spoiler alert. And everyone is
shooting.
He can't be back.
Yeah.
And there's all that denial. So that idea of like, how would you actually accept that you're a wizard? And here, magic for me. I don't know what you think of when you think about, have you ever done things you can't explain? But we can talk about that. When have you and I done things, and other people have done things that you can't explain how you did them? I think about this conversation. I think about writing. I think about when you're speaking from a place of flow. When you do those things where you enter, you know what I mean? It's not the linear. It's not the linear mind anymore. All those non-linear things, and
what we're doing here.
The tennis player and the football player, and it's not this like mind is going step by step instructions, but it's again that deeper part of the conscious that goes bang. It's like the Force in Star Wars.
Yeah. And
in Harry Potter, it's magic. And so it's in that sense, we are wizards, right? Because you have the ability to do what the Muggle does, but you also have the capacity for magic of a form. It's just not making things levitate and all that. That's the beauty of the story and the hyperbole of the story for what is the magic we can actually do. And just like the Force in Star Wars, and the Force in Star Wars is an even more powerful example of this, is that it's a life force. Life force! And see how these guys just keep skating over the truth. They keep skating over it. They're going over... Yep, that is, the Force in Star Wars, Tony Robbins' life force. It's this thing that comes from something beyond you and is channeled through you. And that's where the power actually comes from. And you're just the vessel. You're just the pen. You're not the arm. You're just the pen through which the words are written in a way. And that to me is the magic. It's why we can't explain. And we try to I made a podcast, I'm going to teach you podcasting. It's like saying, this is how you can become a wizard.
I used to worry about doing the podcast, being like, what the hell are we going to talk about? I don't know how are we going to structure this and that.
Yeah.
You press play and you just have a conversation.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, it's an hour 50 and you're like, what the hell?
How did that happen?
Yeah, you can't explain it. Nor can I remember 97% of what I say, but you have fun, that's for sure.
Absolutely. The next thing my mind goes to is the Muggles, right? And so this is all really, really building the chronology of the start of the first book as well, because we're introduced to the concept of Muggles kind of by Hagrid as the first kind of guide on Harry's journey. It's very hero's tale, right? He's the guide there to show him big cuddly giant, BFG, big friendly giant. Hagrid is, and the Muggles dress differently, right, to the wizards. So Vernon Dursley sees all these people dressed like wizards around at the start of the book, and he's thinking, what the fuck's going on?
Who are these freaks?
Yeah, who are these freaks?
And also, oh no.
Yeah. And they're warning, there's a quote in the first book, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's, you're going to love this. They'll go to any lengths to ignore magic, even if it's staring them in the face. So powerful. People will always, resist.
No, I can't do
the
that.
Truth.
No.
Yeah, but even other people, like when you try, it's the feeling when you're trying to tell someone something like this is the truth, and they're like,
no, it's not.
Nah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what the evidence is. And it's analogous to that, trying to tell someone in the Harry Potter world, a Muggle, about magic. And so the whole magical world is concealed to just almost be polite and not scare the shit out of the Muggles, which it makes me think about the not preaching. Yeah, I mean, like just leave the Muggles in the Muggle world. The only problem is, it's a black and white line in Harry Potter, like you're a Muggle or you're not. Whereas I think the only difference in our actual world is that it is kind of a spectrum. So the Muggles like being asleep, right? Like being asleep in the Matrix, and then becoming a wizard is like kind of the red pill, and that's the true magical world is kind of there, but it's just intangible, and that scares people. This is all like very interesting stuff. It's part of the first one. I think to me that's like the letting people be lesson as well. That importance of letting people be. Yeah, cool. So there's a lot of power in that, the way Harry Potter is introduced in that first book. There's so much in there, and relates to, I don't know, maybe just realizing who you are, because that's what he has to do. But the power of it, the fact that he's grown up outside the wizarding world. I don't know if you remember, but they're all afraid to say Voldemort's name.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, you can't say his name. But the funny thing is, Harry is the only one who's not afraid to say it.
Yeah.
Harry has had the actual confrontation with Voldemort as a baby, but is not afraid of the name. And that shows me so much, I think, that inherited fear. That so much of fear is inherited and baseless. Because he's just like, why would we be afraid of saying the name? And Ron's like, dude, just can't say the name. And Hagrid, like, I'll write it down. Oh, I can't write it down. All right, I'll say it. And that's a symbol of how most fear is actually inherited. Like right there. It's culturally conditioned.
Is it that saying?
And it feels real. And it's just a trauma. It's a social trauma. Right? And I think comedians are normally people who break through that.
Yeah.
Like, we can't say the N-word. Boom. Or we can't do this. We can't do that. And like, watch me. And that's so often the comedian's role. But that as well, very powerful. What were the other things? There's also a moment where he shares his sandwiches with Ron on the train. So Ron's family don't have much money. And, they're a very interesting family, the Weasley family, like symbolically. Like they have everything, but they don't have an excess of money. They're the most beautiful. They're the archetypical like family in this whole series. They're so loving. They just adopt Harry as one of their own sons, and he feels much more like their son than the Dursleys. And you get to very interesting territory here when you discuss the Weasley family. But the first thing I noticed was that Harry shares everything with Ron. And Ron's like, I just got these shitty sandwiches, because I'm a fucking poor little pauper. And Harry's like, oh, it's great you got a mum that makes you sandwiches. You know, like he's got the one thing he doesn't have, you know?
Yeah.
And Harry's got everything else, but he'd trade it for the family.
Mm.
And he shares with Ron, and why does he share? Well, he's grown up so humbled by the mistreatment from the Dursleys, so he doesn't have an inflated sense of himself. And through the Harry Potter character, that's his true gift.
Mm.
He doesn't have an inflated sense of himself really at any point. He's very humble. Almost the forced humble, like in terms of like the low self-esteem because of how he's grown up. So that's interesting, that family theme. So he sees the aching of not knowing who his parents were and realizing who they really were. You got the Weasley family dynamic. And something Lewis said was very interesting because I got his insights before I planned the series, like did my notes. He said, if you notice the books get progressively more mature, they start off very innocent, childlike to reflect that age of being 11 or whatever. And then the adolescent stuff comes in by the 4th, 5th, 6th, and it gets more complex and there's dating and all that. And I didn't pick that up, so credit to Lewis for that one. And he goes, I wonder one day I'll read it and I'll be like Molly and Arthur in terms of like if/when hopefully has kids, I'll look at it like, oh, shit, that'd be so terrifying. The fear that your kids are going to die. Because she has that moment in the 5th book where they see her greatest fear. There's that boggart thing. We'll talk about boggarts later, but you see...
So I'm like, no.
Yeah, well, I gave you time.
No.
Yeah, you flip that to the Dursleys, and the relationship with the Dursleys is very... It's not subtle at all how important love is, right, as a force. That is not subtle at all. That the Harry Potter... J.K. Rowling is just pointing a finger at this one thing at the core of life. Why is Harry at the Dursleys? Because they're the only family he has at the start, right? Biological family. And while he's there, Harry's saved from Voldemort by his mum, right? So Voldemort comes to kill Harry as a baby because he thinks he's a threat. And his dad, tries to defend him. He dies first, but then the way it's set up is that the mother didn't have to die. She could have just stood aside. She didn't stand a chance anyway. So, in the cold, hard, ego-rational world of logic, don't get between me and the son, because all that's going to happen is 2 of you are going to die. And that's the logical world, right? The so-called logical world. And ego is only of the linear mind. You know what I mean? Ego is only of the thinking mind, not the feeling, not the heart, not the gut. It only lives in the thinking brain. And that's how it looks at the world. That's what Voldemort is a lens of. He's the lens of the world as a totally kind of supposedly rational place without feeling and love. And that's his logic represents that logic. And the mother sacrifices herself for Harry out of love and nothing else. Not logic. Totally illogical. He's going to kill the baby anyway. No reason to suspect it's going to save him, but that's what love is. It supersedes all that. And so the fact that she dies establishes and proves this love thing that Voldemort can't overcome. It's a magic he can't understand. And Harry's safe so long as he's with the Dursleys, even though they're Muggles. That enchantment exists on somehow. And what the Dursleys are, to me, is minimum viable love. Minimum viable love. It's the least amount of love you could give a fucking person, to be honest. But it is still some part of love. We only look at the Dursleys for the bad that they do. And there's some times where they say, you're out, we've had enough of you. But they have him there.
Yeah.
Now, they don't deserve a round of applause.
Certainly not. Yeah. They get Shittest Parents of the Year award.
They get the Shittest Parents of the Year award. But...
Still a version of...
And that's the reason why I bring that up. I know so many people And people have been very brave and generous enough to explain the reality of their lives and how they grew up. Sometimes you hear stories about parenting that you think that's just a shame. Not that that's a shame, but like that is not ideal. So obviously you got parents like those Dursleys who grew up, had a situation themselves, and that's why they are the way they are. But sometimes you have to remember that there is still love there. Despite the abuse, despite the mistreatment, despite the harshness, the cruelty, the coldness, there is still some level of love there. It's just being really drowned.
By what sort of measure? Just by still accepting into the home and...
Yeah, but I don't know if it's any one act, but it's that there is love underpinning it. It's just that there is love underpinning it. And for that, when I say that, like what measure, you think of what De Mello said, I think. When the eye is unobstructed, the result is vision. When the ear is unobstructed, the result is hearing or listening. When the mouth is unobstructed, the result is speaking. When the mind is unobstructed, the result is thought. And when the heart is unobstructed, the result is love. So not this thing we actually have to consciously do, but like breathing. It's this thing that actually just courses out from you as long as you don't obstruct it. The Dursleys are obstructing most of it, but they still let him live there. And it's like, and they give him a cupboard. And then Dudley's second bedroom, which is so generous for them, which is so funny. But it's enough to get Harry to where he needs to get. And when they leave in the 7th, when they leave part for the last time in the books, Dudley's like, they're like, well, let's go. And Dudley's like, but what about Harry? And he actually shows some concern for Harry. And why? Because he saves Dudley's life in one of the books. He's like, well, he saved my life. And so Harry shows his mother's kind of gift in being able to transcend the fear and the insecurity and the mistreatment. And he's always able to transcend it, which we'll talk about much more. It's just so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. So the Dursleys, we can't forget, is minimum viable love. There's still something there. Like, I hate him and he reminds me of everything. It's what the Snape storyline is too. He reminds me of everything I'm insecure about and I hate. But so Snape and the Dursleys, I never thought about this beforehand, but Snape and the Dursleys have a lot in common. Yeah. Harry's a common object, but it could really be anyone who reminds them of their pain. For Snape, it's so powerful because it's he literally looks like the guy that used to bully him. James Potter, Harry's father, was a real dick, arrogant dick. Really gave Snape a hard time, but he's also the product of Lily, who Snape loved. And I didn't know that. Yeah, that is the and that's not revealed. So all you see through the books is Harry and Snape just always fighting. Don't trust one another. Or Harry never trusts him.
They don't reveal that in the books?
Only at the very end.
Oh.
You have no idea that he had any affection or affiliation with his mother at all till the very, very end. And you're wondering... Spoiler alert. Yeah. This is not for people who are like, oh, I'm thinking of watching Harry Potter. I'm going to watch some long podcast series on it. Yeah. This is people after crystallizing the learnings in the hope that you'll find many more. Because complex things like a story, the insights are never ending.
I would have loved to have read that.
Yeah. I really want to read them now. But I don't, because I know what happens. So that Snape story is just the actual, you have your mother's eyes. It's the dilemma of you represent everything that I'm insecure about, which is where the fear and the ego always comes from. It's because I'm insecure there. And you trigger me. You trigger the worst parts of me. And it's the same for Petunia, Dursley and the Dursleys. And you got that dilemma, but underneath there somewhere is love, because you're also the thing I love. And that dilemma is everywhere in human behavior in relationships.
Mm.
It's everywhere. It is everywhere. And so, I don't know. There's this other idea that Dumbledore has this line at the, I think it's at the end of the first book, at the Philosopher's Stone. He says, "It is our choices, Harry, that define us far more than our abilities." And I think we'll have a whole episode in this dedicated to the education system.
Yeah.
But it is so fascinating, that thought, because I think that is a thing that is, I'd say, in the society you and I have grown up in and how we look at it, the idea that you are your abilities is such a common logic, I'd say. People value people just because they're good at things. You get paid more because you're good at helping us make money. We love that child because they're good at things. We love that. We give that child more attention, or they just demand more attention because we have to go competitions and all this.
Could you substitute? Well, choices lead to character.
Choices. I think choices are the result of like the real thing about who you are. That's the real who you are.